You know, as Democrats, we have to show that we understand, number one, we're delivering, number two, and we're keeping our promise. Just have to keep making our case, just as the Republican Party today offers nothing but fear, lies, and broken promises.
President Biden last night on a fundraising call for the Democratic National Committee. The Republican chairman of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors rejected a new subpoena from Arizona State Senate Republicans yesterday, calling their partisan ballot review an adventure in Never Never Land. Jack Sellers, who leads the board that oversees elections in the county, wrote in a scathing letter, quote, "It is now August of 2021. The election of November 2020 is over. If you haven't figured out that the election in Maricopa County was free, fair, and accurate yet, I'm not sure you ever will." He added, "The reason you haven't finished your audit is because you have hired people who have no experience and little understanding of how professional elections are run." The subpoena issued by the state Senate sought local computer routers and internal logs to bolster a GOP commissioned review of the 2020 presidential election results, saying that the items are needed to conclude the controversial audit. Sellers concluded in his letter, quote, "The board has real work to do and little time to entertain this adventure in Never Never Land. Please finish whatever it is that you are doing and release whatever it is you are going to release."
Yeah. Hey, Willie, it's this has been a clown show, and we knew it was going to be a clown show from the beginning. But just to explain to people at home what's going on, I mean, there are Republicans all across America. I've got a really good friend, a guy I worked with for a very long time, who are supervisors of elections for their counties. And they most of them voted for Donald Trump. Most of them supported Donald Trump. And most of them are professionals whose job it is to make sure that every vote is counted and every vote is fair. Every election is fair. And so what an insult it is for these Republicans, regardless of their political views, to have these half-wits coming in who are obviously trying to rig this process that they're going through to do nothing but second guess the work of fellow Republicans who are professionals, whose entire livelihood and whose reelection depends on getting fair and free elections done right. And they did, again, as Krebs and as so many other people have said, they did a hell of a job in 2020, the fairest, safest election held yet.
And as you say, a lot of the people who say that are Republicans who voted for Donald Trump. You can go to the state of Georgia, the governor there, the secretary of state there, where they counted the vote 3 times, have said again and again and again, I supported Donald Trump, I voted for Donald Trump, but Joe Biden won in the state of Georgia. We counted 3 times. The people we're talking about in Arizona are none of the people you just described. A private group called Cyber Ninjas, and we're going to get into some of the funding behind the Cyber Ninjas, who are there, frankly, tampering with election equipment. Now, they're doing it because elected Republicans in the state of Arizona are allowing them to do that. But these places, these precincts and these states are going to have to buy new election equipment because you have a private group taking custody of voting equipment, voting machines, and messing with it, playing with it. So now that can't be used again. Those places have to buy new stuff. Let's talk about all this with member of the New York Times editorial board, Mara Gay, and chief Washington correspondent for the New Yorker magazine, Jane Mayer. Jane's new reporting for the new issue is titled, "The Big Money Behind the Big Lie. Donald Trump's attacks on democracy are being promoted by rich and powerful conservative groups that are determined to win at all costs." In the piece, Jane writes about what's going on in Arizona. Quote, "Although the Arizona audit may appear to be the product of local extremists, it's been fed by sophisticated, well-funded national organizations whose boards of directors include some of the country's wealthiest and highest-profile conservatives. Dark money organizations, sustained by undisclosed donors, have relentlessly promoted the myth that American elections are rife with fraud, and according to leaked records of their internal deliberations, they have drafted, supported, and in some cases taken credit for state laws that make it harder to vote." Jane, it's great to have you with us. So let's dig into this a little deeper and let's talk about Arizona, because we have that statement coming out from the head of the Board of Supervisors there, a Republican, again, saying knock it off to these people. So who exactly is funding the cyber ninjas, and what is their agenda? Why do they want to push these groups into states to play with and to call into question the results of the election?
So the cyber ninjas have a tiny amount of money that's coming just from the state Senate in Arizona, but the vast proportion of it, something like over $5 million, comes from contributors who are basically national conspiracy theorists who are allied with former President Trump. So you've got that group. You've got Patrick Byrne, the person who started Overstock.com, is one of the big ones. Michael Flynn and Sidney Powell. Those sort of people are involved in funding the specific audit. But the audit itself, which people think of as a clown show, as you said, is actually not that funny when you look at it closely, because what it's trying to do is overturn a certified American presidential election. And the forces that are pushing that, and this is what I was sort of looking at, include a whole array of very prominent national conservative groups, people that you don't ordinarily think of as involved in sort of flaky conspiracy theories. So you've got the Heritage Foundation in there. You've got ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is backed by big corporations. You've got the Bradley Foundation of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is one of the biggest conservative foundations. It has $850 million in its treasury to spend on these kinds of adventurous things. And what they are doing is they are funding people who are spreading doubt about the security of American elections. And why are they doing it? Because it works for them. I'm not even sure how many of them believe it, but what it's done is they're exploiting this distrust of American elections in order to push through laws that crack down on voting rights and keep the people they don't want from the polls, basically. And they're also laying the foundation, many people told me, for potentially a lot of distrust about the 2022 elections and the 2024 elections. So it's a kind of a dangerous precedent that's going on there. And as you said, as Joe said, the people standing in the way tend to be solid conservative Republicans from Maricopa County who literally witnessed this election. They made sure it was safe and fair. And there's one in my story named Bill Gates he's so articulate. And he's someone who's been fighting authoritarianism and is shocked, saying, it feels like I'm fighting it at home in Arizona.
Well, that is, Jane, when you talk about the Heritage Foundation, that's what's so bizarre to me. The Heritage Foundation opposed authoritarianism in the old Soviet Union, always putting out policy papers about Cuba, China, and other places that were not champions of Western democracy. And they were, whether people like the ideology or not, I can tell you as a conservative, much of the Reagan administration went to this group for policy. It was policy obsessed. When I came into Congress after the 94 elections, the Heritage Foundation, if you needed an issue, if you needed background on regulations, if you needed a background on taxes, if you needed a background paper on NATO, if you need whatever you needed the background, if you wanted to cut money from the Pentagon, you could call somebody at Heritage and say, where's the waste in the Pentagon? Where do we find money to balance a budget? And they were there. It was this obsession with policy. It's the same thing with like a group like Club for Growth that used to be obsessed with policy. Now they've turned into hacks for conspiracy theorists. Talk about what this was a surprise to me. Tell me about the Heritage Foundation. How exactly are they involved in this?
No, they have a unit. It's the election integrity, they call it, unit, basically. And there are a handful of lawyers there who are, Hans von Spakovsky is one of the most famous ones there, who are busy litigating around the country, pushing the idea that there's a ton of election fraud, that American elections are rife with fraud, basically. And if you talk to any nonpartisan expert, they will tell you, in most elections, most national elections, there are a handful of people where their votes are problematical. That is it. I mean, in Arizona, I went back and looked. There may be, there are 4, I think, people being charged in the 2020 election with having, improper votes. 4 in millions of votes, millions. And it's just not a serious problem in this country, as Trump's own election officials said. So the Heritage Foundation, though, is really the heart of pushing this kind of conspiracy theory thinking. And beyond that, truly, when I was sort of turning over rocks and trying to figure out where's this money coming from that's funding all of this, you get back to this Bradley Foundation in Milwaukee, which is has major league serious people on its board. Robert George, who was a professor at Princeton, who's very well thought of as a conservative theorist. Paul Clement, who's one of the most prominent, probably the most prominent litigator in front of the Supreme Court. These people are on the board, along with a number of very, very rich corporate people. And they're funding this activity, I think, because it's so useful. This lie is very useful for enabling a power grab in the state legislatures, where they're putting through laws and coordinating with the national groups like Heritage to crack down on voting rights.
All right, Jane Mayer, thank you so much for your reporting. So important. We greatly appreciate it. The new reporting is in the issue of The New Yorker. Thanks so much for being with us.